Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove and I am back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I received over the last 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's no filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, how many days per week should a natural bodybuilder train? You know what's interesting is I actually get quite a few questions from natural lifters, and the questions always revolve around dietary nutrition, supplementation, and then training. And what they want to know is should they be doing the same stuff that the guys who are running the anabolic steroid cycles are running? And my answer is always yes and no. Okay. So the reason I say yes and no is because it depends on what you're doing and it depends on your genetics. It depends on your fitness level, how well versed you are in the gym, okay, your recovery time. So there's a lot of factors to take into consideration. With that being said, a natural lifter, whether you're a bodybuilder, power lifter, or just your average gym goer, in my opinion, should not train identically to a person who is using anabolic steroids, which we also call enhanced lifters. Okay. Now, what I mean by that is you can still bench press, you can still squat, you can still deadlift. But if you're not using anabolic steroids, you're not going to recover as quickly as someone who is. So in this scenario, my recommendation is to back off on the volume. So for someone who's running a steroid cycle, they might be able to do 5 or 6 sets per exercise and recover within 30 seconds to 45 seconds, depending on the steroids that they're on. Okay. Whereas someone who's natural might be able to do 3 or 4 sets for that exercise and might need 60 to 90 seconds to recover. Okay. So that's okay. Okay. But you can still train the same as far as the exercise selection, but how you train is going to obviously be different because one person is enhanced while the other person is natural. Same thing with diet. I see a lot of people that will try to follow. I'm not going to name anyone here, but a well-known bodybuilder or a well-known celebrity who is obviously on some type of steroid cycle that includes human growth hormone, possibly even Ozempic. So if you're following that nutritional plan that that person's on, a lot of times I see these celebrities and these bodybuilders who are taking in 500, 600 grams of carbs a day on a weight loss plan. And then you get someone who's natural trying to do that. It's not going to work. Okay. You're not taking growth hormone. You're not taking fat burners. So that's not going to work for you. So my recommendation to this person would be to follow someone who is natural. Okay. So to try to figure out, okay, well, what is this person doing? Another thing too, you have to make sure is when you're looking at your genetics, right? If you are someone who is in the genetic elite, which is really only 10% of the population, then you can get away with eating 500, 600 grams of carbs a day on a weight loss plan. But if you're like most people, I touched on this last week. If you're like most people who have average genetics, you can't do that. Okay, so if you are trying to cut down on weight, my recommendation to you would be to work with someone who has average genetics or who works with people who have average genetics and have helped them lose weight. Okay, don't necessarily work with the person who's got godlike genetics and can just like look at a treadmill and lose 10 pounds, right? Without even having to get on it. And there are people out there like that, the genetic freaks, right? And we call them the genetic elite. Okay. So, as far as training is concerned, yes, you can do the same exercises as someone who's enhanced. No, you should not train exactly like that person. You might need a little longer to recover. You might need to reduce the volume of your workouts. But at the same time, there's no reason why you yourself can't bench press, deadlift, seated row, barbell military press, walking lunges. You can do all the same exercises as someone who's enhanced. As far as the nutrition component is concerned, my recommendation is to assess your genetics, assess your physique, make sure that your goals and expectations are realistic, and don't necessarily follow someone who is quite obviously on fat burners and anabolic steroids because you're not going to get the same results as them. Okay. Um, And as far as supplementation is concerned, now I'm talking about legal supplements, not the anabolic steroids, so the ones that you would go into supplement stores and you could purchase. I've talked about how I believe that 90% of the supplements out there are garbage. Now, keep in mind, I'm not including vitamins and minerals because I think those are essential. So I'm not talking about vitamin D, vitamin E, omega 3s, zinc, all that stuff. I'm talking purely about the pre-workout powders, the post-workout powders, the intra-workout powders, the fat burners that are legal but are really just pumped full of caffeine. I'm talking about those. Okay, so don't waste your money on that stuff. So again, to answer that question, yes, you can train like someone who's enhanced as far as exercise selection is concerned. No, you should not train exactly like that person because your body will take longer to recover. And not just in between sets, but after the workout itself. So someone who's on an anabolic steroid cycle might be able to train legs 2 or 3 times a week. If you're natural, there's a very good chance that if you're training your legs hard, once a week will be sufficient. Maybe twice, but splitting it up, quads on one day, hamstrings and glutes, calves the other day. Okay. So you've got to be smart and you've got to be realistic and you have to understand that those drugs are very powerful. They do work well. They're not miracle drugs, but they do work well. And if you're not using them, you should not be training and eating identically to someone who is. All right. Okay, Nick, what's the best order of exercises to do in a workout? This question kind of correlates with a question I had, a similar question I had last week on the channel. And the question person had asked, what's better, compound exercises versus isolation exercises? And I said, well, you actually want to do both. And I also touched on that you want to front load your workouts with compound exercises. So the more bang for your buck, the barbell back squats, the flat barbell bench press, heavy deadlifts. And then you want to put the isolation exercises towards the end of your workout. And I use the analogy of compound exercises are what builds the house, and isolation exercises are what paints the house, right? So build your house before you paint it. So that would look like in a chest workout, that could be incline barbell bench press, flat barbell bench press, and maybe do some incline dumbbell presses. Now you've got 3 compound exercises out of the way on your chest day. Finish off that chest workout, maybe some low incline dumbbell flies and throw in some cable crossovers. Okay. And that would be working your isolation exercises. So you're working pec major for your first 3 exercises, and then you're working pec minor for your last 2 exercises. There is something to be said about pre-exhaust techniques. However, I don't recommend most people do pre-exhaust techniques unless you are years in advance in training, maybe training for an elite bodybuilding show, and you're trying to really take those muscles to failure and pump out all those striations. But pre-exhaust techniques, in my opinion, are not really that beneficial for the average gym goer. Okay. I wouldn't recommend it because you do risk injuring yourself. Okay. So I recommend front loading your workouts with compound movements and then back loading your workouts with the isolation exercises. In my opinion, that's the best way to get the best results with your health and your physique. All right. Okay. Okay. Nick, how much cardio is too much for muscle growth? There's no such thing as too much cardio unless you yourself are not eating correctly. So if you are in a severe caloric deficit and you're doing 2 or 3 hours of cardio a day, well, yes, that's too much cardio because your body will go into a catabolic effect. Okay. Because when you do cardio, you burn calories. If you're already in a caloric deficit, your body is not going to be able to create more muscle mass through protein synthesis because it's taking whatever calories you're giving it on this calorie deficient diet just for survival. So it's not even thinking about building muscle. So there's something to be said about when you're doing your cardio, you just want to make sure that your nutrition is in check. Never have I ever had anyone do more than an hour of cardio a day, even pre-contest, ever. Okay. I don't believe in it. I feel that you can lose the weight correctly and intelligently through diet. Cardio has its place, and I've talked about this numerous times in the past, but it's a mistake to rely on it for fat burning purposes because you're always going to have to rely on it for fat burning purposes. Whereas if you get your diet in check and you dial in your dietary nutrition plan, now things become easier. You don't have to do endless amounts of cardio. You can skip a week of cardio and you won't put on any weight because your diet's in check. So there's that fine line, but you shouldn't think that, oh, if I do too much cardio, I'm going to lose muscle. Not true. Like I said, if your diet is not in check, yes, you will lose muscle. But if your diet's not in check anyway, you're still going to lose muscle. So you want to make sure your diet's dialed in first. Now, how much macronutrients should you be having? Protein, carbs, healthy fats? Well, again, that's going to depend on your goal, your activity level, your genetics, your fitness level, how well versed you are in the gym, how often you can go to the gym. So there's always factors to take into consideration before we plug in your macronutrients. With that being said, though, you want to make sure that your macros and your calories complement what you're doing throughout the day. Okay, and that means with your workouts, your resistance training workouts, and your cardiovascular training program. Okay, so don't think that cardio burns muscle. That's more bro science. Okay, as long as your nutrition is in check, you can do cardio. Now, I personally, like I said, I don't give anyone more than an hour of cardio a day. I think that's crazy. I always try to get people to lose body fat through diet first. I say, if we can get your cardiovascular endurance built up through the weight training, even better. Because when I work with people, whether it's in-house or online, I make sure they're not resting very much between their sets. So they're constantly moving. So they're getting their resistance training workout and a cardiovascular training workout, two in one. Okay. When I got ready for shows, the last 3 or 4 years, I never did any cardio because I just tweaked my diet and I was fine. Okay. That also helped that I was able to build more muscle over the years, so I didn't have to rely on too much cardio. And as I talked about numerous times in the past, the more mass that you have, whether you're male or female, the less cardio you have to do to burn fat. Because the more muscle you have, the more calories you burn in a rested state, which equates to more fat loss. Okay. So if you like cardio, do cardio. It's great for your heart health. Um, like I said, I don't advise people to go more than that 30 to 45 minute mark. If you're getting ready for a bodybuilding show, fitness competition, and you're maybe 2 or 3 weeks out, you might have to take it up to an hour depending on how far behind you are. Okay. But for most people, 30, 45 minutes a day, 4 or 5 times a week, that should be sufficient. And if you're in a weight loss program, that with a good sound diet should work wonders for you. Okay. Okay, Nick, what are the best exercises for building a bigger chest? Yeah, so in my opinion on this one, when it comes to your chest, okay, so when it comes to chest, you've got pec major and pec minor, right? Pec major is responsible for all your presses, pec minor is responsible for all your flies. That's it. Chest is a very small muscle group. It's not complicated. It's not like the back, it's not like the legs. Hell, it's not even like the shoulders, which are very complex muscles. Chest is very basic. So push and fly, that's all you can do. Okay, so it's up to you to figure out how can I maximize my results in order to build, in your case, a bigger chest, a more predominant chest, a more striated chest, a more detailed chest. So what's worked for me and for numerous clients over the years is by prioritizing incline work over flat work. Okay. And the reason I say this is because there's so many people that go into the gym and the first exercise they do, flat barbell bench press. Men are guilty of this. I see this time and time again. And it's a mistake because pec major is actually 80% of your upper pecs right up here. So it would make more sense to prioritize 80% of the chest cavity, right? So in order to do that, you want to do some incline work. Now, what I typically do is I'll start something off with like my chest workouts off with a low incline barbell press. Okay. I find that works really well because it helps warm up my anterior deltoid. So it's not very high. It's about a 120-degree angle. That's it. And I'll do about 5 sets of that and I'll throw in a drop set at the end. Then I'll move on to a flat barbell press because I still want to work my mid chest. But the reason I'm doing that too is a little bit strategic. I want to give my upper pecs a bit of a break now and hit more of the mid pecs, right? So I'll do 5 sets of that, drop set, same thing. Okay. Then I'll move on to a high incline dumbbell chest press because now my upper pecs, they've cooled down a bit. Yeah, they still work a little bit during the flat barbell press, but I gave them a bit of a break. So like I said, I'm being strategic. I'm approaching my workout methodically, intelligently. And so I go into that high incline dumbbell press. And again, I put the bench probably back, I would say probably at about 100 degrees at this point, maybe 110 degrees. So it's a little higher than the first angle. Okay. And, I'll knock out again 5 sets, do my drop set, so on. That's it. No more presses. Then I'll move on to my flies. And again, I'll go into like a low incline fly. I'll go into that 120-degree angle and now I'll work my upper chest and probably finish up with some cable crossovers for mid chest. But I prioritize my upper chest for the simple reason is that 80% of pec major is located up top. So don't neglect the mid chest. Still train the mid chest, but prioritize the upper chest if you really want that chest to pop and to squeeze up here. And don't forget too, when you're doing your crossovers, when you're doing your flies, make sure you squeeze your pecs as hard as you can. You want to get as much blood and glycogen into those muscles for peak contraction. As far as lower chest, I don't do decline work. I've never done decline work. I don't recommend people do decline work. I've touched on this in the past as well. The reason I don't advise people to do decline work, I find it puts far too much emphasis on the anterior cuffs, anterior deltoids and the rotator cuffs. So I recommend staying away from decline work. I feel that the lower pecs get enough work when you do flat barbell bench press, doing some cable crossovers. You can even throw in some flat dumbbell presses if you like as well. But I find that works best, and I don't feel that you need to do any decline presses whatsoever. All right. Okay. Next question. Nick, how do you train around injuries? So, in order to train around injuries, first you have to assess where the injury is. You can't just say, well, it's in my shoulder. No. Is it in your anterior deltoid? Is it in your medial deltoid? Is it in your posterior deltoid? Is it in your trapezius? Is it in your rhomboids? Now, if you don't know the answer to that, that's okay. I'm not expecting you to be well versed in anatomy and physiology, but your trainer or coach should know. Okay. So, whenever I have a client come to see me and they say, I'm having pain in my chest, I'm like, wait a second. Pain in your chest internally is feel like it's your heart? No, it's a muscle strain. Okay. So let's assess what you can and cannot do. And I'll get them to do a few different planes of motion. So whether that be a lateral raise, whether it be a seated row, with no weight, okay, whether it be an overhead press, whatever it is. And then I can find out what planes and ranges of motion they can and cannot do. By having that information, I'll be able to program accordingly while they work around that injury. Okay. So I always tell people, just because you're injured doesn't necessarily mean you can't train. Okay. So whether that's a lower back strain, whether it's a knee issue, it could be a hip issue, it could be a dislocated shoulder, it could be a pec tear. You have to remember there's 126 muscles, actually more than 126, but there's 126 muscles in a human body that you can actually stimulate, contract, control, squeeze in the gym. Okay. Build. So if you have one injury to one specific area, that doesn't mean you can't work out. Okay, you just have to train smart. So my recommendation, if you don't have a coach or trainer, then you have to do your own homework and you have to figure out where exactly that injury is. Okay, so like I said, if it's in your shoulder, you got to figure out, okay, well, does it bother me when I do a shoulder press? Does it bother me when I do a lateral raise? Does it bother me when I do a rear delt raise? Because numerous times I'll have people come in, for example, and they're experiencing pain in their anterior deltoid. So they can't really do a shoulder press, right? They can't do a barbell military press, but they can do dumbbell lateral raises, no problem. So the medial deltoid is okay. They can do bent over rear delt flies, no problem. Rear delts are okay. They can do rope upright rows. Traps are okay. And with the anterior deltoid, they just can't do presses. But all of a sudden, they might be able to do front raises. Oh, that doesn't bother me. So I'm like, okay, well, we can still work the anterior deltoid. We just have to be smart with how we train. Okay. So you have to program accordingly. And that's where it does come down to working with an experienced, knowledgeable coach that can kind of take away that trial and error for you and troubleshoot and figure it out within 2, 3 minutes of what you can and cannot do, and then program accordingly based on that. But I would not recommend taking prolonged periods of time off from the gym just because you're dealing with one specific injury. Okay. All that means is you can't train that muscle group for maybe 2, 3 weeks. I don't want to put a timeline on it. Sometimes it's only a week, depends on what you've done. Sometimes it's longer, but you can still train around that. You just have to be smart. You just have to maximize your planes and ranges of motion. All right. Okay. Nick, how do you, oh, sorry, I was already got that question. Sorry. Nick, what's the best way to train arms for maximum growth? What I find works for most people is supersetting your arms. And I know that's not always practical, especially if you train in a commercial gym. But if you have the luxury of training in a private gym or your own home gym, supersetting the biceps and triceps works exceptionally well. You have to remember, your biceps and triceps are agonist versus antagonist muscle groups. This is why I always pair up arms in clients' workouts. I don't put biceps on back day and I don't put triceps on chest day. Because when you're doing your chest, you're already using your triceps. They're your synergist muscles. When you're training your back, you can't help but turn your biceps off because they're going to be the synergist muscle in the pull. So by the time most people get to the biceps after training back, the biceps are already fatigued. Same thing with the triceps after chest. So I don't like that. So I put biceps and triceps on their own day. The arms get their own day for everyone, myself included. And I've always found that supersetting the arms work best because you talk to a lot of people and they'll always say, oh, arm day is easy because, it's a smaller muscle group. You don't have to lift crazy amounts of weights. But if you train arms correctly, it should never be easy. Okay. Because when you're supersetting your arms, you're taking very minimal rest periods between your sets. If I do a tricep rope cable extension for my triceps and I knock out 15 reps, I immediately go over to an easy bar curl. I don't rest. I go right over and knock out another 15 reps because my biceps haven't done anything. My triceps did all the work. So my triceps are tired. They a break, but then my biceps start to work, right? Then once I'm done those, I go back to doing tricep extensions. Now, I can't take credit for this. This has been a training approach used by numerous bodybuilders over the years, including Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I kind of copied what they did, and then I put it into my own programs. I added a little bit of twist of it though, and a little bit of tweaking, revisions, and I added to my clients' programs. Okay. And I talked about last week how I like to front load the triceps with cables and I like to front load the biceps with free weights. And then towards the end of the workout, I'll go more cables for biceps and more free weights for triceps. Okay. And the reason I do that is to help release a little bit more synovial fluid throughout the joints, especially the elbows, okay, and the tendons. So I don't want to get tennis elbow or golfer's elbow. So again, I'm approaching my workouts methodically and intelligently. And I do the same approach with every single person I work with, whether it be in-house or online. So I find supersetting does work best. And the great thing about supersetting, you're maximizing your time in the gym. I'll honestly knock out 40, sometimes 45 sets for arms. I know there's a lot of people out there that say that's overtraining. I feel great, but I'll do that in like 45 minutes. Okay. Not even 40 minutes. Because I'm constantly moving. I'm drenched in sweat. My arms feel like they want to fall off at the end of the workout, but I know I was able to stimulate muscle growth. Okay. So that works best. If you're in a commercial gym, I understand it's a little bit more difficult to superset. In that case, what I recommend you do, try to focus on, again, maximizing your planes of motion. So you're focusing on not just the concentric contraction, which would be the up phase in, like, say, a bicep curl, but also your eccentric contraction. I always tell clients when you're doing curls, the down phase is just as important as the up phase. Remember that. Same thing with the press downs. Your down phase in this case will be your concentric contraction. Your up phase will be the eccentric contraction. You want to control that up phase. You don't just want the cable to drop back up again. Control your reps, minimal rest period. Really try to focus on squeezing the bicep, squeezing the tricep. You really don't have to go too heavy to build these muscles. Okay. They're small muscles. And don't forget, they do get worked indirectly with the biceps on back day and the triceps on chest and shoulder day. So, with that being said, there's no reason to be in their squat rack. Well, you should never be in a squat rack curling, but I was going to say curling a barbell with like 100 pounds. You don't need to do that. Okay. I honestly, I put like 50 pounds on the barbell and those are my curls. Okay. And that's not too heavy, but I make sure that I squeeze every single rep. So I'm doing it properly and getting the most out of my biceps. Okay. So that's what I recommend is make sure that you're squeezing the muscles, focus on both the concentric and eccentric phase of the movement and minimal rest periods. That's the best way to grow your arms. And if you have the luxury of training in a private facility or your own home gym, superset those things. All right. Okay. A few more questions here. Nick, how many calories should a bodybuilder eat to bulk up? I hate that word so much because I feel that when people use the word bulk, they get sloppy. They start talking about dirty bulks and they just eat everything they possibly can, get as much calories in. And then they come to me after and they wonder why they look like shit. And I say, well, you're just eating for food. That's it. That's all you're eating is calories in, calories in. But your body doesn't just take those calories and put on muscle. It doesn't work like that. Your body takes the good calories, which is the good macronutrients, which most importantly is the good micronutrients, and utilizes that for protein synthesis and muscle growth. But your body is not going to take a box of donuts or a box of cupcakes and turn that into muscle because you're bulking. No, it's going to turn that into fat and you're going to get sloppy. You're going to look fat. So if you want to look lean year round, which is something that I've always tried to maintain leanness all year round. Even when I was trying to put on muscle back when I competed, I never wanted to be 10, 15 pounds over stage weight ever because I knew that would be so hard to get back down to that stage weight again. So I didn't need to. I didn't need to eat an abundance amount of calories to put on muscle. I just had to bump my calories up slightly. And usually I would just bump up my protein, sometimes my carbs, but usually just my protein and my fats. And that would help build muscle. Okay. If I noticed that I was starting to put on some bad weight, I started to notice maybe put on a little bit of fat around my midsection or my love handles. Then I drop maybe the carbs down, maybe take the fats down for a few weeks and then slowly bring it back up again. So you're always keeping a watchful eye. But if you just go in with that, I'm going to eat everything, dirty bulk, put on size, you'll put on size, but you're going to put on size in your waist. You're going to have jiggly love handles. You're going to have a fat ass. No thanks. Because what happens then, you get into this yo-yo dieting approach and then you get that loose skin. Okay. So, I'm almost 40 years old now and I don't have any loose skin. Okay. And I competed in bodybuilding for 15 plus years and I came out injury free. Came out no serious health issues whatsoever. And most probably, I came out still looking and feeling good. A lot of these guys, what happens is they do bodybuilding for 15, 20 years, sometimes longer. Some people stay longer than they should. And then they're done and they burn out or they have a severe injury and they stop training. Okay. Or they've screwed up their metabolism so much from all this yo-yo dieting that no matter what they do, they can't keep the weight off. And I'm talking the bad weight. So you want to make sure that just like your workouts, you approach your diet methodically, intelligently. Okay. So none of this dirty bulk or just getting all these calories in. No, you start off with a baseline. When I work with guys and women who are trying to put on size, I always start with the baseline. So I look at their bodies and I say, okay, well, in a guy's case, you're 200 pounds. But I'm looking at you and you're 200 pounds, and I'm going to guess you're probably around 14% body fat just by looking at you. Okay. I don't do calipers, but I have a pretty good eye for this. So I'm like, yeah, I could probably get you up to 230 pounds within 3 months. But at the 30 pounds that we add on, how much of that is going to be muscle? Because I can tell you right now, if I do that in 3 months with someone with average genetics who's not on any fat burners, not on any anabolic steroids, the majority of that weight, as in 25, 26 pounds of that, is going to be fat and water. So why would I do that? Why would I do that just to put on weight on the scale? So instead, what I try to do with people is I try to teach them how to implement a plan that you're slowly bumping up calories gradually. And we keep a watchful eye. So right now you're at 14% body fat. You're at 200 pounds. I'd rather see you at 190 pounds at maybe 8% body fat because now we're changing your body composition. So forget about this bulking. Let's just try to focus on building muscle and losing fat because yes, despite what a lot of people say, that can be done at the same time. Okay. I've done it before and I've done it with hundreds of people. So it can be done. You just have to be strategic. You don't want to be lazy with your diet. Okay. So the whole bulking and just eating calories for calories and get big, and that's very old school approach. It's something that I don't believe in. It's something that I don't do with my clients. I always take a very slow, gradual approach, whether it's gaining weight or losing weight, because I always say the same thing I say to my clients when I'm trying to lose weight. I'm like, the more calories we can give you while you're continuously losing weight, the better, right? I don't want to starve you in order for you to lose weight. A, it's not healthy. B, it's going to screw up your metabolism, potentially your thyroid. And C, it's not sustainable because if I put you on 1,000 calories a day, sure, you're going to lose 3 or 4 pounds a week, but you're not going to be able to sustain that. So once we hit your target weight loss goal, what do we do then? You're going to go back to your regular diet. You're going to put all the weight back on and probably more, which is what happens with most people when they follow these extreme dieting strategies, right? And it's the same thing I say to people who are trying to bulk or put on weight. If you go too extreme, you do it too fast, it's going to look sloppy. You're going to put on fat, you're going to put on water. Do it slow, keep a watchful eye. Even better, work with an experienced coach that has a watchful eye and can say, you know what, we got to taper off here on the calories. Maybe we need to throw in a little bit more cardio. We need to drop those carbs for a week, whatever it may be, because you're also that 14% body fat. It now looks like it's at 16% body fat. So we need to watch that. Okay. The goal should always be if your goal is to put on weight, the only weight you should want to be putting on is muscle. Okay. You should not be wanting to put on fat unless you're extremely underweight. But most people, I don't think I've ever worked with someone who's underweight. Most people who are trying to put on weight are average weight, or maybe they're a little bit heavier already, but they want to put on size. And they're under the misconception that they just have to eat to put on size. Not true. You eat, you'll put on size, it's going to look sloppy. Okay. You need to lose weight. You got to make sure you don't go into extreme caloric deficit because what's going to happen then, like I said, mess up your metabolism, mess up your thyroid. It's not sustainable. All the weight comes back on when you come off that diet. Okay. There's a fine line. Do it slow, do it gradually, have long-lasting results. All right. Okay, last question. Nick, what is best for me if I'm not able to get my full workout in one go? For example, if it has to be broken up into two 30-minute segments as opposed to one 60-minute session, does this decrease intensity in time decrease the effectiveness, or the two 30 minutes are better than nothing? Okay, so I have talked about this in the past. When it comes to the duration of your workouts, it's not about how much time you're in the gym, it's what you do in the gym that matters. As I can tell you right now, I work with a lot of people who do 45-minute sessions with me, and they get more done in those 45-minute sessions than some people get done in 2 hours in the gym. Okay. I have people that show up late for their workouts, sometimes even 30 minutes late, not purposely, but shit happens, work, life, kids, whatever. And those people still get more done in 30 minutes and some people get done in 60 minutes. So it's not the duration of the workout, it's what you do in the workout that matters. Now, I've talked about in the past how my own workouts are never longer than 50 minutes. I don't have a single workout, maybe the occasional leg day, but rarely are my workouts longer than 45, 50 minutes ever. Okay. But when I'm working out, I'm not talking to people. I'm not checking my phone. I'm not playing on TikTok. I'm not taking selfies. I'm training. Okay. I'm thinking about my next set. Should I increase the weight? Should I decrease the weight? How's that feel on my trap right now? Maybe I should switch up the exercise. Maybe I should switch up the angle. So that's what I'm thinking as I'm resting. Okay. And that's very important because I think a lot of people think, well, hey, I was in the gym for 2 hours. But you're not training for 2 hours. You're in the gym. You're talking to people, you're cruising the social media, you're screwing around, but you're not training. So to answer this question, in my opinion, you're better off if you know you can give it your all, undivided attention for 30 minutes versus a lackluster workout for 60 minutes. You're going to get better results by splitting that workout up. Of course, absolutely. So rather than do that one 60-minute workout, split it up into two 30 minutes, but give it your all, knowing that, hey, I only got 30 minutes. I don't got time to screw around. Okay. And when you approach it that way, the time becomes irrelevant. Because I know when I first started training, I was guilty of spending 2, sometimes 3 hours in the gym. And this is before cell phones. I mean, cell phones existed, but people would have them in the gym. So, like, I would actually just be training. So I was overtraining my body. I was just going multiple sets. I was trying to do every single exercise I possibly could. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like 15 years old, though. Okay. But these days, when I see people in the gym for 90 minutes, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I'm like, there is no way that you are training intensely. Zero. Nobody can make, not even a professional athlete can maintain that level of intensity for 90 minutes, 2 hours, so on. Okay. It doesn't work. So you're going to get better results if you know, hey, you know what? I can zone in for these 30 minutes. Yeah, I'm going to have to split this workout up. Do it. Okay. Because you're going to build more muscle. You're going to lose more fat because now you're using your time in a more efficient manner. Okay. Being in the gym for 60 minutes and doing a lackluster workout versus going two 30-minute sessions and going all out, it's working smarter and not harder. Okay. So in this scenario, that's what I recommend. And I have to tell you, like I said, this is a question from one of my in-house clients, and this person does train really hard. So thinking about that is that when I look at people who train hard, I know what they can accomplish in 30 minutes. And I know what the people who don't train hard can or cannot accomplish in 60 minutes. So train smart. It's not about the duration, it's what you do during the workout that matters most. Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Monday, August the 25th. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your diet, your training program, or your supplement protocol, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for supporting my YouTube channel, my online coaching business, as well as my in-house personal training business here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I truly do appreciate all the support, all the feedback I receive from each and every single one of you. Thank you all again, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now.